Intro. Atramentus, CEO today, they discharge in your food. Those 4 words, scribbled agilely on a bankrupt linen napkin, hit harder than any headline. They chock-full Billionaire CEO Malcolm Devo mid-bite, freezing the angle aloof inches from his mouth. For a man who had survived boardroom betrayals and market crashes, this was different. This wasn't business. This was personal. And it was about to backfire into a atramentus adventure that would agitate an absolute industry. Malcolm didn't appear to the cradle for steak. He came undercover, dressed in the apparent fleet hoodie and beat-up sneakers to investigate whispers he couldn't ignore. A high-end restaurant he agilely endemic in Charleston, South Carolina, had been flagged in an bearding letter for racially biased account and apprehensive kitchen practices. He capital to see for himself alone. No entourage, no appropriate treatment. From the moment he absolved in, it was bright, the rumors weren't aloof rumors. He was built in by the restroom, ignored for 10 abounding minutes. The seer skipped his table entirely. And now this, a agenda from a waitress with eyes abounding of quiet abhorrence and shoes beat to the bone. Her name was Naomi. She didn't ask for help, she aloof told the truth. And that accuracy absurd the affectation of a polished, poisonous system. This isn't a loofy adventure about food. It's about courage, about what happens aback addition risks aggregate to do what's right. It's about the hidden layers of racism that still abode places of advantage and how one woman's adventuresomeness affected a reckoning. This is a atramentus story. And if you've any time wondered how amends really starts, this is it. Before we go any further, booty A additional to like this video and subscribe for added true stories that matter. Belief that activity the body and claiming the cachet quo. Now, breathe abysmal because the abutting 10 account will change the way you see. Power, race, and what happens aback a simple napkin turns into a weapon of truth. Malcolm Devo was a man who turned silence into strategy. At 46, he had become one of the best admired black CEOs in America. A tech prodigy, angry investor, he had congenital his billion-dollar authority not aloof through brilliance, but through precision. Every chat he batten was measured. Every deal he fabricated was calculated. He didn't accept in luck. He believed in data, discipline, and dignity. But alike abstracts couldn't adapt him for the agenda Naomi had larboard below his coffee cup. Connected at 4 that night, Malcolm knew the amount of actuality underestimated. Raised by his grandmother in a baby Alabama town, he'd watched his mother abrade floors so her son could abrasion a shirt afterwards holes to school. His aboriginal computer was from a Abbey donation bin. His first investment, a scholarship armamentarium he congenital at age 24, from his Barnes startup's first big IPO. But success doesn't abolish memory. It aloof buries it deeper. On paper, he was now the architect of Darrow Capital Holdings with interests in apple pie energy, fintech, and affluence hospitality. He collection a atramentus Tesla archetypal S, sat on bristles accumulated boards, and lived in the accommodation overlooking Central Park. But behind bankrupt doors, he was still that kid who abstrused to tie a tie from a YouTube video afore his aboriginal investor pitch. He didn't dress flashy, no gold watches, no artist shoes. Malcolm understood how bound bodies advised a atramentus man by what he wore afore they anytime listened to what he said. So when that bearding letter landed on his board 2 weeks earlier, claiming one of his flagship restaurants was mistreating black barter and employees, he didn't accelerate an advocate or a PR team. He bought a Greyhound ticket, threw on a hoodie, and walked into the blaze himself. No one accustomed him aback he absolved into the cradle that night. And that was exactly the point. Sometimes to see the truth, you accept to abandon central heat. That's what Malcolm had learned. He wasn't aloof a CEO, he was a mirror, and this time he capitaled the arrangement to see itself raw, unfiltered, and up close. Because real leadership isn't about actuality seen. It's about seeing what no one, Abroad wants to look at. The Cradle was the affectionate of restaurant that fabricated bodies lower their choir aback they absolved in. Tucked inside a adequate celebrated abode in city Charleston, it oozed southern agreeableness and exclusivity. Clover drapes, gold-belted glassware, candle ablaze that fabricated anybody attending 10% more important. You didn't appear actuality aloof to eat. You came to be seen. The walls were lined with portraits of Confederate generals, calmly unlabeled, as if history could be ashen by mood lighting. The name, The Cradle, was a nod to Charleston's past, the cradle of Southern elegance, as their website proudly proclaimed. But to Malcolm, alike for dispatch bottom inside, the name echoed article else, article darker. The cradle of exclusion, of control. From the moment he entered, the accent was set. The hostess, an adolescent white woman with absolute aspect and a clipboard smile, scanned his clothes like they were a threat. She didn't admit him. That was the plan. He had alleged a plain zip-up hoodie, aphotic jeans, and off-brand sneakers. "Do you accept a reservation?" she asked, her articulation flat. "No," Malcolm said, calm as ever. She exhaled slowly, performing acrimony like it was allotment of her job. "We're absolutely appointed tonight, sir. But I accept we can bench you at the bar or abreast the kitchen entrance. Would that be acceptable?" Malcolm nodded. "Sure, that works." He followed her through the admirable dining room, passing tables abounding with white diners in apparel and artist dresses. Not a distinct Atramentis face in sight except the staff. That allotment hadn't afflicted aback the 1800s. She led him to a table by the service doors, area the aroma of acromatize drifted in every time they swung open. No candle, no smile, a loofah agenda slapped bottomward like a warning. Malcolm sat quietly, scanning the room. The wait agents smiled brighter at the tables with Rolexes and country club memberships. The manager, a middle-aged white man with slipped-back hair, fabricated his circuit like a baby kisser at a fundraiser. Confrontation begins. Atramentis story shaking hands, bedlam too loud. But his eyes anesthetized over Malcolm like he wasn't there. The cradle wasn't broken, it was activity absolutely as it was designed to. And Malcolm, agilely watching, saw it for what it was. Not a restaurant, a performance, a bowed area. Appearances mattered added than people, where the accomplished dressed itself up in accomplished linen and still alleged itself tradition. Naomi, Brooks confused, like someone who had abstruse connected a go not to accomplish babble aback she walked. At 25, she carried herself with the quiet adroitness of addition who had apparent added than her allotment of adamantine days. She wasn't loud, she wasn't flashy, but there was article aciculate abaft her bendable eyes like a blade wrapped in velvet. She had already dreamed of acceptable a civilian rights lawyer. She was centermost through her law amount at Howard Aback activity, absurd, advanced open. Her mother's blight analysis came with no warning and alike below mercy. Bills accumulated up faster than her scholarships could cover. So, she larboard school, arranged up her activity in a distinct suitcase, moved back to Charleston, and took the aboriginal job that would appoint her afterwards a question. That job was at the cradle. The money was appropriate for a count job, but the atmosphere was suffocating. Naomi was the alone Atramentis waitress on staff. Administration didn't say it out loud, but she could feel it in the way they appointed her. Consistently on bifold shifts, consistently ashore with the least desirable tables, and somehow consistently abhorrent a back article went wrong. She wore a smile like armor, alleged every table sir or ma'am. She caked wine, cleared plates, and swallowed her pride daily. But a like armor wears thin. It was the way the manager, Mr. Comedy, looked at her like she was almost to count his time. The way the added servers laughed aback she got stiffed on tips. The way the chef already joked about sending the special to the Atramentis tables. She never laughed. She aloof filed it away. She wasn't weak. She was watching, waiting, surviving. But tonight, acquainted different. The man at table 14 didn't fit the accepted mold. He didn't abrasion a Rolex or bark orders. He aloof sat there silent, observant, and abnormally calm. Aback, she greeted him. He looked her in the eye. Absolutely looked like he saw her, like he noticed. That moment, baby as it was, befuddled article apart, central her. Because Naomi wasn't. Aloof a waitress. She was the attestant to every quiet injustice, every aside slur, every aphorism that afflicted depending on who absolved through the door. And tonight, she was done watching. Tonight, she was activity to act, alike if it amount. Her everything. The presidential prime was not aloof a steak. It was a spectacle. 48 ounces of cartilage in Wagyu beef, dry-aged for 90 days, accomplished with a rosemary-smoked arch aerial tableside by a gloved server. It came with a Fueg raw, buttermilk truffle potato belfry, and a price tag of $700. A bowl meant for show, not soul. When Malcolm ordered it, Naomi blinked twice. "You'd like the presidential prime," she repeated, her articulation steady but her abdomen tightening. He nodded, calm as a lake, medium rare, and a bottle of the 2005 Staglin Cabernet. Edition $200 decision. Naomi had taken orders for that bowl a dozen times, consistently from barrier fund managers, politicians, influencers with gold cards. Never from Edition in sneakers and a hoodie. Never from Edition, who sat at the table by the accepted kitchen doors. She acquainted eyes on her. Above the dining room, Mr. Adobe stood with his accoutrements folded, watching her like a militarist with a clipboard. She knew what he was thinking, that she was crumbling time, that a man who looked like that couldn't allow a pail like this, that if it went unpaid, the accusation would fall on her. She hesitated aloof a additional too long. "Is that a problem?" Malcolm asked gently, but with the accurateness below it. "No, sir," she said quickly, coming appropriate up. She angry on her heel and headed for the POS terminal, her affection thudding adjoin her ribs. Every server knew the rules. If a chump looked ambiguous and ordered an big-ticket meal, administration accepted a credit agenda for the kitchen accursed it. No exceptions. But Naomi didn't do that. She keyed in the adjustment like it was any other. And aback the awning. Flashed red, acute administrator approval, she hit override and swiped her own ID. She'd aloof taken albatross for a $700 steak and a wine bond on a gut instinct. Abaffed her, Mr. Clay's voice boomed through the hallway. "Did he pay up front?" "No, sir," she replied without turning around. "Fresh, you bigger a jur he does," he growled. But Naomi wasn't praying. She was planning because maybe, aloof maybe, this man wasn't actuality to be served. Maybe he was actuality to see. And if he was about to see everything. Naomi had watched a lot of things appear in that kitchen. But what she saw tonight burst the aftermost sliver of silence she had been captivation onto. As the presidential prime was prepped, she noticed Chef Rick accepted added for his attitude than his comestible talent, angular over the baking steak with the askance grin. Afresh came the act. Subtle, quick, but unmistakable. The argument appropriate. On the steak, angry it over like nothing happened. The sous chef laughed. Naomi froze. Her aboriginal aptitude was denial. Maybe it was an accident. Maybe she didn't see what anticipation she saw, but the amusement told the truth. This wasn't new. This was normal. And the steak was twist revealed. Racist stories already plated. The acerbity bubbled below her skin, hot and sharp, but she couldn't scream. Couldn't accomplish a scene. Not yet. She looked against the dining room and saw Malcolm, still calm, still watching. The man who didn't belong, who ordered like he did. They didn't apperceive who he was, but she was starting to suspect, and that afflicted everything. She had, abnormal, to decide. Say nothing and serve a attenuated meal to a man who ability authority the keys to this place's future, or booty a accident that could end her job on the spot. She accomplished into her accessory abridged and pulled out the account. Pen she consistently carried, snatched a beginning linen napkin from the rack. Her easily trembled as she wrote, the ink absence above the accomplished thread. They spit in your food. This abode is not safe. Ask to see the kitchen cameras. No name, no signature, aloof accuracy bankrupt tight. She slid it into her abridged, as the pail was handed to her below a argent dome. Her baby formed in her aerial as she absolved the bowl across the dining room. Malcolm looked up as she approached. With accomplished grace, she placed the bowl afore him, aerialed the dome, and said softly, "Enjoy your meal, sir." He nodded. Then, as she cleared the abandoned aliment bowl with her appropriate hand, her larboard slipped the napkin aloof below the bend of his place setting. An additional later, she was gone. No words, no eye contact, aloof the quiet hope that the man at table 14 would apperceive how to apprehend a buzz accounting in cloth. Malcolm sat still for a connected moment, staring at the bankrupt napkin like it was a alive wire. He hadn't affected the steak, hadn't alike aerial his knife. Article in Naomi's eyes had told him to wait. She hadn't announced it, but the coercion was accounting all over her posture, her breath, the slight tremor in her fingers. He advanced slowly, carefully, and slid the napkin into his palm. Advance it. The words stared aback at him. Stark, uneven, desperate. They discharge in your food. This abode is not safe. Asked to see the kitchen cameras, his jaw locked. Every beef in his face went bean still. It wasn't the discharge that got to him. He had eaten far worse things in his years of traveling incognito, testing systems, testing people. No, what fabricated his pulse spike was the phrase, "This abode is not safe." That was broader. That was systemic. That was rot from the root. And Naomi, she wasn't aloof aggravating to protect him. She was oral an alarm. Malcolm bankrupt the napkin already more, slipped it into the central abridged of his hoodie, and pushed the bowl away. He didn't accomplish a scene. Didn't alarm anyone over. Not yet. He accomplished for his phone, an earlier archetypal burner. He acclimated on these kinds of trips and opened a defended app. A few curtains later, a bulletin was beatific to his Arch of Aegis in New York. Red banderole at the cradle. Pull kitchen camera backups for tonight. Cross-check agents' records. Quiet, fast, abounding report. Then he stood from above the room. The manager, Mr. Clay noticed. His eyes narrowed as Malcolm approached. "Is aggregate all right, sir?" Clay asked, smiling wide but scanning for a tip. Malcolm's articulation was calm but cold. "I'd like to allege to you privately." "About the meal." "Of course," Clay said, gesturing against an alley lined with affected awards and affected certificates. Inside the office, Malcolm didn't sit. He let Clay allocution first. Some able accent about bedfellow acquaintance and presentation excellence. It was all white noise. Finally, Malcolm cut in. "I'd like to see your kitchen cameras right now." Clay's smile faltered. "I beg your pardon. You heard me." And in that moment, article afflicted abaft Malcolm's eyes. The affectation came off. The CEO had accustomed, and he was done pretending. Clay hesitated aloof long enough to affirm what Malcolm already suspected. "The kitchen cameras," he repeated, stalling. "Those are mainly for account control, not bedfellow, service concerns." Malcolm didn't blink. "That's fine. Let's start with tonight's footage, accurately about the time my steak was prepared." Adobe confused in his chair. "I'd accept to get approval. Our arrangement Athenaeum alone in 30-minute blocks. Also, some feeds bend automatically if the anamnesis fills. So, unfortunately, we may not accept cut the story," Malcolm interrupted, his articulation low and razor-sharp. Clay looked up, bent off bouncer by the abrupt about face and tone. I'm giving you one adventitious to do this clean, Malcolm continued. You're either the guy who helped balderbotheration in his abode, or you're the guy who active it. Clay's face palled. Still, he approved one last deflection. Sir, if I may ask, who absolutely are you? Malcolm leaned in, just abundant for his words to acreage like a weight. I'm the man who signs your checks, and if I see one added lie fall out of your mouth, you won't accept addition 1 to cash. Clay's aperture opened, afresh closed. He stood, flustered, and confused to the bend cabinet. Fumbled with a key, pulled out a Arenaceous drive, absorbed it to the monitor, and began scrolling through burst footage. The moment the prep station came into view, Malcolm's accoutrements crossed. Adobe clicked forward. Then, abruptly, a jump. A glitch? No, not a glitch. A apple pie cut. Footage skipped redemption and reform. Atramentus Waitress exactly 2, and you account. And 12 seconds. Appropriate aback, Naomi would accept had been cat and mouse for the order. Appropriate aback, the steak was plated. Clay affected to tap again, but Malcolm chock-full him with a distinct word. Enough. Al fresco, the appointment door. The noise of the restaurant continued. Forks clinking, wine pouring, amusement rising, and falling in waves. Inside, the blackout was surgical. Malcolm pulled out his phone, accursed off an additional message. Partial footage, accessible tampering. Flag, Mr. Clay, account. Staff. Preserve all files. He slipped the phone back in his abridged and angry to the man who was now visibly afraid abaft the desk. You're done for tonight, Malcolm said. Airing me out, a fresh go home, and I acerb advance you alarm a lawyer. Mr. Clay stood frozen. He had no abstraction aloof how abysmal the storm was activity to get, but the aboriginal articulation had angry, and the aperture was no best shut. The drive aback to his auberge acquainted best than it was. Malcolm didn't about face on the radio. He didn't charge music. He bawled silence. He bawled focus. By the time he accomplished his suite, his Aegis aggregation had already responded. They'd pulled advancement feeds from the Billow servers, raw, uncut, and untouched by any bounded interference. What Mr. Adobe had approved to adumbrate was now laid bare, affected by animal frame. Malcolm poured himself a bottle of water, sat bottomward at his desk, and opened the file. There it was, time-stamped, bright clear. Chef Rick Aptitude over. The presidential prime. He wasn't rushed. He wasn't distracted. He did it with full intent. A spit, afresh a smile. Afresh he angry to the sous chef who laughed and nodded. The audio was faint, but aloof, loud, abundant to bolt it. That's what you get for acting like you accord here, Rick muttered. Malcolm leaned aback in his chair. He acquainted no shock, no outrage, alone algid clarity. This wasn't a mistake. It wasn't a moment of bad judgment. It was a culture, a quiet animal arrangement congenital to abase bodies like him. The additional they didn't follow the script. Worse, the video log showed this wasn't the aboriginal time. Earlier footage from the aforementioned anniversary appear addition instance. A atramentus brace built in at the back corner, their bowl arriving nearly 30 account late. Abaft the scenes, the kitchen laughed. Chef Rick tossed a steak on the attic before throwing it aback on the grill. This wasn't an abandoned incident. This was policy in disguise. Malcolm clicked save and encrypted the files into 2 separate servers. One with his acknowledged team, the added with the arch of accessible relations. The bulletin he included was simple. Abounding centralized review, agents' interviews, emergency compliance training. Do not breathe a chat until I say go. He stared out the window, the Charleston skyline ablaze above the glass. They had approved to abase him. They had failed. What they had done instead was betrayal a affection that had gone absolved for too long. And now the story was no best about steak. It was about justice. It was about change, and someone was activity. to acknowledgement for it on camera below adjuration and afterwards warning. The abutting morning, Naomi showed up to assignment exhausted. She hadn't slept. Not really. Not afterwards what she had done. Not afterwards what she had seen. Every moment since bottomward that napkin had been a cloud of second-guessing and dread. She kept waiting for the call, the text, the confrontation, something. But aback, she observed through the aback aperture of the cradle, no one said a word. No icy glares, no knowing smirks, annihilation until the hostess whispered, "Mr. Clay's office." Now Naomi froze. She didn't like bother clocking in, aloof turned, straightened her apron, and absolved the connected alley against the manager's door. She accepted Clay, maybe even the arch of HR. Worst case scenario, security. What she didn't expect was him. Malcolm still in that aforementioned hoodie, still calm, but this time he was standing. The air in the allowance shifted. "Naomi Brooks," he said, motioning for her to sit. She didn't. "I know," she whispered. "I'm sorry. I shouldn't have." He captivated up a hand. "You should have," Malcolm said, "and you did." Her affection thudded. "Am I actuality fired?" He befuddled his head. "Not by me." Naomi blinked. "I own this place," he said, articulation low. "The building. The brand. The 1 year later. Touching stories. People who run it. Well, they acknowledgement to me." Her legs gave out. She sat. I reviewed the footage. "I've apparent what happened in that kitchen. I've apparent what's been accident. Actuality for months, maybe years." Naomi looked down. "I didn't apperceive who abroad to tell." "And you didn't have to," Malcolm replied. "You did added than best bodies any time would." He took a breath. "So, here's the truth. I can accept this absolute abode shut bottomward today. I can fire everyone, rebrand the business, alpha fresh, and I will. But before I do that, I charge one affair from you." Naomi looked up, her articulation almost a whisper. What a choice. He leaned in. "You can erring abroad quietly. I'll accomplish abiding your taken affliction of. A scholarship, a new job, whatever you need." She stared at him. "Or," Malcolm continued, "you can stay. Advise me clean this abode from the inside. From blemish as the new administrator of belief and culture." Silence continued amid them. Naomi's articulation shook. "You absolutely assurance me with that." Malcolm nodded. "I already did. You aloof didn't apperceive it yet." And in that moment, for the aboriginal time in a connected time, Naomi breathed afterwards fear. The abutting 24 hours confused fast. By noon, the cradle was no best a restaurant. It was the abomination arena in a tuxedo. Malcolm moved with precision. Quiet calls, active coordination. His acknowledged team flew in from New York. His PR aggregation was already drafting the statement. But he wasn't ambuscade abaft able remarks. Not this time. At absolutely 12:30 p.m., 2 bare SUVs pulled up al fresco the advanced entrance. The cafeteria army had just begun trickling in. Men in apprenticed suits, women in chaplet and delicate blazers aback the doors opened, and 2 plain, bankrupt federal agents stepped inside. They didn't shout. They didn't charge to. They went beeline for the kitchen. Chef Rick didn't alike accomplish it to the back exit. He was escorted out the advance door, still acid his decrepit apron. The sous chef followed. Then Mr. Clay. 3. Arrests. One day, no negotiations. The agents was stunned, some frozen, some agilely clapping. A few aloof watched, mouths accessible as the men they already feared were absolved out like thieves. Outside, Malcolm stepped up to the belvedere now positioned on the advanced steps. Reporters were already gathering. Mics pointed, cameras rolling. He didn't allege with fury. He batten with fact. "Yesterday, I entered this architecture as a customer. Today, I angle actuality as its buyer, and what I saw central this restaurant, what I bald-headed, does not reflect the belief of Devo Holdings or this community." He paused, eyes scanning the crowd. This was not a bad apple. It was a broken tree, and we're acid it down. He afresh gestured against Naomi, who stood quietly to his appropriate in a tailored fleet blouse and slacks. She didn't smile. She didn't wave, but she stood tall. "This woman," Malcolm said, "showed added candor in one night than best admiral do in a career. She is the acumen this truth came to light, and she is the acumen this abode has a future." Naomi's throat tightened. The acclaim that followed wasn't polite. It was real. It was earned. Malcolm accomplished with one final statement. Short and sharp. "We're not canceling the cradle. We're rebuilding it from the inside. And this time, it's going to serve added than aloof food. Its activity to serve justice. No script, no spin, aloof accuracy on abounding display." Naomi had never beat a clothing anorak that cost more than her rent. Until now, 2 weeks afterwards the arrests, the cradle remained closed to the public, but the lights central were on. The kitchen had been gutted, the walls repainted, the uniforms redesigned, the Confederate portraits gone, replaced with framed images of Charleston's unsung Atramentis pioneers, chefs, artists, community leaders, and at the centermost of it all, Naomi Brooks sat at her new board in an appointment that acclimated to accord to Mr. Clay. Closing thoughts. Heartwarming Stories. She still wasn't acclimated to the appellation administrator of belief and culture. It sounded corporate, heavy, but Malcolm had insisted it meant added than policy. It meant presence. She wasn't aloof there to assurance affidavit or peer award cutings. She was there to clean assurance from the central out. Her aboriginal day in the role, she started with a staff-wide meeting. No suits, no scripts, a loofah amphitheater of chairs in the dining room. Some bodies couldn't attending her in the eye. A few still aside abaft her back, but best listened. She told them what happened, not with shame, but with strength. She explained why the culture failed, why blackout is never neutral, and how they were all activity to do better together. She created an arrangement for bearding reporting, formed out mandatory bent training, captivated account acknowledgement sessions, assassin new managers, people who looked like the association they served. She additionally did article unexpected. She, at the Phoenix Convention Center, a forum on race and leadership turned historic when Donald Trump leaned into the mic and told Barack Obama, "Sit down, boy." Gasps shook the hall. For a long moment, Obama said nothing. He straightened his jacket, sipped water, and let the silence grow heavier. Seek, Trump smirked, daring a reaction. When Obama finally spoke, his words cut sharper than any shout. "Respect has never been something I had to beg for. Respect isn't tied to a title. It's earned by how you treat people, especially those who don't look like you, pray like you, or agree with you. The most powerful thing a leader can say isn't, 'sit down,' it's 'stand up with me.'" The hall erupted, hashtags trended, and millions replayed the clip. For many, it wasn't just a clash of two presidents. It was a lesson in dignity, restraint, and what true leadership means.